they suddenly emerged on the crest of a wave from the side from which I could hear the screams of my comrades. It seemed strange to me that none of the sailors swam to them. Suddenly one of the rafts disappeared. I didn't know what to do, either swim to the second one, or not take risks and continue to cling to the box. This seemed to me a reliable way to stay afloat. I had not yet had time to make any decision, but the instinct of self-preservation had already directed me to the second raft, which was getting further and further away with every moment. I swam for about 3 minutes. At some point I lost sight of the raft, but tried to stick to the direction I had taken. And suddenly it washed up right next to me, a big, white, empty raft. I grabbed onto the hemp net with all my might and tried to climb onto him. I succeeded only the third time. Already on the raft, out of breath, not knowing where to go from the whipping cold and merciless wind, I made a huge effort over myself and stood up. And when I got up, I saw my comrades nearby who were trying to swim to the raft. I recognized them immediately. Doorkeeper Eduard Castillo tenaciously held Julio Amador Carvalho, who was wearing a life belt, by the neck because he was on watch at the time of the disaster. Julio Amador shouted, "Hold on tight, Castillo." They were floundering among the boxes, swaying on the waves about 10 meters from me. On the other side was Luis Rengifo. A few minutes earlier, I saw him on the destroyer. He was trying to get out of the water, holding his headphones in his raised right hand, without losing his usual restraint and confidence with which he declared that he would rather turn the sea inside out than it. He took off his shirt to make it easier to move. He lost his life. Even without seeing him, I would still recognize Louis by his voice. "Hey, fat one, row here," he shouted. I hastily grabbed the oars and tried to row towards my comrades. Julio Amador, held tightly by the neck by Eduard Castillo, approached the raft. Behind him, far behind, appeared the small figure of the fourth sailor, Ramon Herrera, who waved his hand to me, clinging to the box. Only 3 meters. If I were forced to choose, I would not know which of my comrades to direct the raft to first. However, when I saw Ramon Herrera, the instigator of the fight in Mobile, the merry fellow from Arjona, who only a few minutes ago was lying next to me in the stern, I rowed with all my might to him. But my almost 2-meter raft turned out to be terribly clumsy in the raging sea, and in addition I had to row against the wind. I don't think I've made any progress. In despair, I looked around and saw that Ramon Herrera was no longer on the water. Only Luis Rengifo swam confidently towards the raft. I had no doubt that he would get there. I remembered his deafening snoring, like the sound of a trombone, and was convinced that his willpower was stronger than the elements. Julio Amador still supported Eduard Castillo, preventing him from going underwater. They were less than 3 meters away from the raft. I thought that if they got a little closer, I could give them the oar. But then a gigantic wave threw the raft into the air, and, taking off on a high ridge, I saw the mast of our destroyer. When I found myself below, Julio Amador and Eduard Castillo, clinging to his neck, disappeared, and Luis Rengifo still calmly swam towards the
ship
raft,
is on fire!
To which he was only 2 meters away. I don't know why I did such a stupid thing. Convinced of the futility of my attempts to move forward, I stuck the oar into the water as it tried to hold the raft in one place, nail it to the water. Tired Luis Rengifo paused, raised his hand just like when he was holding the headphones, and shouted again, "Row here, fat one." The wind hasn't changed. I shouted back to him that I couldn't row against the wind, and asked him to push himself, to make the last push, but, in my opinion, he didn't hear me. The boxes of goods were left behind. The raft danced from side to side on the waves. In the blink of an eye, I found myself more than 5 meters away from Luis Rengifo and lost sight of him. But he ducked under the waves so that they would not carry him far from the raft. I stood there, paddle ready, waiting for Luis Rengifo to get close enough to reach him. But he was already tired and began to despair. Then, already going under the water, Luis shouted again. The last time Luis Rengifo asked me on the destroyer what time it was 11:30. It was 10 minutes before I looked at my watch again. This happened before the disaster. When I looked at the dial on the raft, the hand showed exactly 12. It seemed to me that an eternity had passed. But in reality, only 10 minutes had passed since I last looked at my watch while on board the destroyer. And during this time, I managed to swim to the raft, tried to save my comrades, and then stood, like a statue, looking at the empty sea, listening to the sharp howl of the wind and thinking that I would have to wait at least 2 or even 3 hours until they picked me up. 2 or 3 hours, and I thought that this was an incredible time for a man who was left alone at sea. But I tried to accept my fate. I had neither food nor water, and I believed that by 3 o'clock the thirst would become intolerable. The sun was hot on my head and began to burn my dry, salt-stiffened skin. I lost my cap in the fall and therefore wet my head with water, and then sat down on the edge of the raft and began to wait for my rescuers. Only then did I first feel pain in my right knee. My blue uniform trousers, made of rough fabric, were wet, so with great difficulty I was able to roll them up above my knees. And when he rolled it up, he shuddered. Under the kneecap there was a deep wound, like a crescent. Either I hurt myself on the hull of the ship, or I already cut my leg into water. But whatever it was, I felt pain only on the raft, and although the wound burned a little, it stopped bleeding and dried up probably because of the sea salt. Not knowing what to do with myself, I searched my things. I wanted to find out what I was left with on the high seas. It turned out that with a clock that continued to tick as if nothing had happened and which I was tempted to look at every 2 or 3 minutes, I had with me a gold ring bought last year in Cartagena, a chain with an image of the Virgin Mary del Carmen, also purchased in Cartagena from a sailor for 35 pesos. From my pockets, I only fished out the keys to my locker on the destroyer and 3 advertising postcards that was given to me at Mobile Store one January day when I went shopping with Mary Edris. I had nothing to do, and I began to read the inscriptions on the postcards, trying to somehow kill time until rescuers were sent for me. For some reason, these postcards seemed to me like a kind of encrypted notes that shipwrecked sailors put in bottles. Probably, if I had had a bottle at hand at that moment, I would have stuck one of these postcards into it to play shipwreck, and in the evening to amuse my friends in Cartagena with my story. Chapter 4, my first lonely night in the Caribbean. At 4 o'clock the wind died down. I saw nothing around except the sea, and had no landmarks, and therefore only after more than 2 hours I realized that the raft was moving forward. In fact, as soon as I climbed on it, the wind drove it in a straight line at such a breakneck speed, which I, wielding the oars, would never have been able to develop in my life. And yet I had no idea where I was or what was happening to me. I didn't know where the raft was heading, towards the shore or into the open sea. The latter seemed more likely to me, since I always believed that the waves could not wash a heavy object to the shore 200 miles from land, much less a person on a raft. For the first 2 hours, I mentally traced the path of the destroyer. I thought that if the ship telegraphed to Cartagena and accurately indicated the location of the disaster, then planes and helicopters would immediately go to our aid. I figured that within an hour they would fly here and start circling over my head. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I sat down on the raft and began to peer into the distance. I took all 3 oars and put them on the bottom of the raft, so that as soon as the planes appeared, I could start rowing in their direction. The minutes dragged on agonizingly long. The sun burned my face and back, and my lips burned, cracked from the salt. However, I felt neither hunger nor thirst. I focused on one thing, seeing the planes. I developed a plan. When I saw the rescuers, I would paddle towards them. Then, when they were above me, I would stand on the raft at full height and wave my shirt. I decided to get ready and not waste a minute, so I unbuttoned my shirt and, sitting on the raft, peered into the distance. Looking around, I had no idea where the rescuers would come from. I sat like that until 2 o'clock. The wind was still howling, and in its howl I heard the voice of Luis Rengifo. "Fat one, row here." I heard it quite clearly, as if Louis was nearby, 2 meters from the raft, trying to grab the oar. But I knew that when the wind howls in the sea and the waves beat against the underwater rocks, a person imagines familiar voices. They sound incessantly, leading to madness. "Hey, fat one, row here." At 3 o'clock I began to despair. The destroyer is probably already moored in Cartagena. In a few minutes, my comrades will happily disperse throughout the city in all directions. I had the feeling that they were all thinking about me now, and, encouraged by this thought, I decided to be patient and wait until 4 o'clock. Even if there was no telegram, even if the destroyer didn't understand that we had fallen into the water, it would still be revealed when the whole crew lined up on the deck at the moment of mooring. This means that they will find about this at the latest at 3 o'clock and immediately inform the rescuers. No matter how long the preparations may be, the planes will fly to the scene of the incident within 30 minutes. So at 4, at most at 5:30, they will appear here. I kept my eyes on the horizon until the wind died down, replaced by the dull, vast roar of the sea. Only then did the screams of Luis Rengifo cease in my ears. Endless night. At first it seemed to me that spending 3 hours alone on the open sea was impossible. However, when 8 hours had already passed since I found myself in the water, I thought that I could probably hold out for another hour. The sun was setting. At sunset it became big and red, and only then did I begin to somehow find my bearings. Now I knew where the planes would come from. I turned my left side to the sun and stared straight ahead, without moving, without looking away for a moment, even afraid to blink. I looked to where, according to my calculations, Cartagena was located. At 6 o'clock my eyes began to hurt, but I still looked. Even after dusk he looked patiently, persistently, in spite of everything. I understood that I could no longer distinguish the planes themselves. I would only see green and red lights flying across the sky and hear the noise of the engines. I dreamed of seeing these lights, without thinking that in the dark I would not be noticed from airplanes. Suddenly the sky turned red, and I still peered into the distance. Then it turned dark purple, and I still didn't take my eyes off the horizon. To the side, above the raft, like a yellow diamond, in the sky as dark as red wine, the first bright star lit up. This seemed to serve as a kind of signal. The next moment, a heavy, dense curtain of night fell over the sea, plunging into darkness, in which I could not see anything. At first I could not overcome my fear. Judging by the splash of water against the side, the raft was slowly but steadily moving forward. Now that the sea was shrouded in darkness, I realized that I had not been so lonely during the day. It turned out to be much worse to sit in the dark on a raft, which I did not see, but only felt under my feet, and which silently glided across the black, very black sea inhabited by unknown creatures. To brighten up the loneliness, I began to look at the square dial of the clock. It was 10 minutes to 7. Not soon. Oh, how not soon after 2 hours, or even 3, it became 5 minutes to 7. When the minute hand crawled towards 12, the clock showed exactly 7, and the sky was dotted with myriads of stars. But I had the feeling that an eternity had passed and that it was about to begin to get light. I still stubbornly waited for the planes. It became chilly. Being on a raft, you can't help but get wet. Even if you sit on board, your feet will still end up in the water, because the mesh bottom sagged under the water, like a basket, by more than half a meter. At 8 in the evening it was darker in the water than in the air. I knew that at the bottom of the raft I was not afraid of sea animals, because the net attached below did not allow them to get inside. But it's one thing to teach and believe what you learn in class. When the instructor shows you the structure of a raft on a small model and you sit on a bench, and another 40 of your comrades are sitting next to you, and it happens at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But when at 8 in the evening you are alone at sea and have nothing to hope for, you begin to think that the instructor's words are absolutely meaningless. The main thing is that half my body was in the water, in a world where it was not people who ruled, but sea creatures. And although the icy wind tore my shirt, I did not dare to get off board. According to the instructor, this is the most dangerous place on the raft, and yet, only there did I feel at least a little protected from sea creatures and huge, unknown creatures that, judging by the mysterious sounds, were swimming past the raft. That night I could hardly see Ursa Minor in the tangled and endless web of stars. I have never seen such a starry sky. There was almost no free space on it, and having seen the Little Dipper, I was already afraid to take my eyes off her. I don't know why, but looking at her, I felt less alone. In Cartagena, when we were given leave, we met the dawn on the Mango Bridge. Ramon Herrera sang imitating Daniel Santos, and someone accompanied him on the guitar. Sitting on the stone parapet, I always saw the Little Dipper over the slope of the Cerro de la Popa mountain. That night on the raft, I suddenly felt for a moment that I was on the Mango Bridge. It seemed to me that Ramon Herrera was singing with a guitar nearby, and Ursa Minor was shining not in the open sea, 200 miles from land, but above the Cerro de la Mountain. But I thought that, probably, now someone was looking at the Little Dipper in Cartagena, and I felt less lonely. My first night at sea was particularly long due to the complete lack of events. It is impossible to describe the night on a raft, when nothing happens and you're insanely afraid of sea creatures, and on your hand there is a phosphorescent watch that constantly attracts your gaze. On the 28th of February, the night that marked the beginning of my wanderings on the sea, I looked at my watch every minute. It was pure torture. In desperation, I decided to take them off and put them in my pockets so as not to be dependent on time. When I could no longer fight myself and took them out again, the hand showed 20 minutes to 9. I didn't feel like eating or drinking yet. I had no doubt that I would hold out until tomorrow, until the planes arrived. But I was afraid that the clock would drive me crazy. In anguish, I took them off my wrist, intending to put them in my pocket again. Then I thought that it would be better to throw them into the sea. I hesitated, not knowing what to do, but then I got scared. The thought occurred to me that without a watch my loneliness would become unbearable. I put them on my hand again and continued to look at the dial every now and then as persistently as I looked at the horizon during the day.